Hi everyone, welcome to Hacking the Workforce, the podcast that gives talent leaders a platform to discuss their companies, the recruitment process, and why you should be thinking of taking up a career with them. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Dan Dale, Director of Global Talent Acquisition for EMEA and APJ at Tenable, global leader in exposure management solutions. Dan, lovely to see you. Great to have you part of the podcast. How are you? All right?
Yeah, I'm good, Damien. Thank you.
Good, excellent. I know you've had a busy week, so hopefully this will be a nice and a relaxed chill for you. But look, obviously,
we'll soon find out.
Yeah, well, look, obviously, loads of people at the minute, obviously out there in my network, your network. You know, between us, we've got a couple of decades of experience in the industry. Keen to let people know out there, what Tenable's doing. What the business is looking for, and obviously a few key points really of what the business is all about, just to give potential employees out there that are looking at Tenable as a potential career destination, a bit more insight into the organisation. So I suppose first things first, company culture. It's a big thing on a lot of people's minds at the minute when they're looking for a new career, whether it be tech and delivery or sales and GTM. What's the company culture like beyond the mission statement on the website?
And the painted things on the walls, right?
Yeah.
I think when you look at Tenable, one of the things that has always been there since since I started, kind of 8 years ago, and even kind of prior to that, is that the company has always been fairly consistent in what it is trying to do for the employees. I suppose you can kind of put it into the three H's, kind of humility, hungry, humble, and honest, and that really has kind of continued. Everyone kind of looks at the sort of the COVID blip, and that was really where I think a lot of companies either showed up or showed themselves up in terms of whether they were staying true to the company cultures they were trying to, kind of portray to the wider world. So we've always tried to be very fair. I mean, in a company that is global, that is across many different continents and, services, many different, people in terms of employees, it tries to be as fair as it can be, but sometimes you've got to make difficult decisions, and they're not always going to be popular ones. But like I say, they're always done from a perspective of, we think this is the right thing to do for the best for the company, not best for an individual, best for the company to do. And so far, Tenable's done that. So we have this idea of one Tenable. This kind of, win together, lose together, and, the ability to have honest conversation and, difficult conversation. And that still remains true. So as I've spoken to lots of people about kind of, company culture and things like that, as I say to those, those painted murals on the wall, like, they haven't cracked. They've still remained the same. Whereas others, they've professed to be one thing, made big statements about it, and then, invariably, they aren't the same. So we've stayed pretty consistent, which is good for us.
Yeah, good. I mean, it's a critical point for a lot of people looking for a new role. It's not just about the base salary and the bonus or the commission element now. It's what's the culture like in the organization? Is it progressive? Is it inclusive? What's the chances of career progression? How does the business really build that sort of successful culture and drive people forward in their careers? Because as well as I do, people in tech get bored very easily if they're not being challenged, and want a company that is constantly striving to move forward rather than just sort of treading water. I think that's a real key thing at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, I think on that point, I think we're at this kind of this juncture where, yes, there is a lot of what companies have got to give to, whether that be potential employees or the employees they have. Yeah, there is also, as an employer, we're looking at, what are we getting back from that? What are you going to give us? It's a two-way street. So, I mean, you've heard it a lot in the industry around kind of levels of entitlement and stuff like that. And I think, it is that fine balance of, if a company is going to give you all these things and, freedoms and flexibility and a good culture, are you prepared to give back to the company, your all, right?
Yeah.
And it's a real fine balance. And and again, one, a company has got to straddle and really kind of navigate well.
Yeah. And just on sort of an interview process, how do you sort of, and your team and obviously the leaders, how do they assess sort of culture within an individual to make sure they're fit without obviously any biasness there? Is there any particular reason, or is it just a gut feel like most people say to me? What?
You've been in this industry long enough, so no one's ever going to tell you like something completely different. No one's ever going to say, do you know what? I'm not a team player. I just want to do everything by myself. And actually, I don't like any of this stuff. You're always going to hear the best version of the individual when they come and speak to you. Hopefully they would have prepared, they would have come, and they're going to say, yeah, absolutely. I believe in, that part of your values or your, the culture. Yeah, I'm this. Truly, the only way that you ever find that out is when they're in, they're in the seat, they're doing the job, and they're mixing with the wider company, right? And then you get to see whether they're being honest. And by the same token, they're seeing whether you're being honest. Right. So I think the one thing I can be proud of when I look at my team and I look at kind of what we have built over the 8 years that we've been here is the amount of people that have come into the company and left very quickly and said, I've been missold, this isn't what you told me it was, is none. I don't think I've ever had that, or maybe I'm just being selective, but I don't think I've ever had that as a as a reason for someone leaving or for whatever reason they decided to go. So I mean, you can't really, you can ask all the best questions or think you're asking good questions, but the reality is those kind of things only really kind of manifest themselves when you're actually seeing them working and collaborating and doing the job that you've asked them to come and do. Other than that, it's all kind of guesswork. I mean, sound pretty cynical, but it is that gut feel. It's like, really?
No. I mean, I've got some clients that have sort of diverse panel interviews. They have a number of different sort of conversations with different people within the organization, just to skin in the game, as they call it. But I suppose it gives people a different idea to understand the culture of the organization and also different people's perspective on the candidate. But again, we start running into extensive number of interviews, which at the minute is not a good idea when you've got someone who's great. So I
mean, and again, there is that kind of trial and error, and in some cases having the diversity of panel and things like that is good. How I kind of find that we work is I want my team and I want my hiring team and the interviewers to be brutally honest, not to the point that they're talking the company down or the role down, but I want them to be very honest about kind of, well, why are we hiring this role? Like, why are we hiring this role? Why is it, kind of what is the circumstance that we found ourselves that has meant that we've got to hire for this role? And again, typically what I end up getting as feedback when I speak to candidates that eventually join is that they're like, actually, I appreciated the honesty, actually it's way better than you thought, or I thought it couldn't be as good as that. Now, again, that's not everywhere, but it's more of a case of that's what we're trying to do, which is if we paint the right pictures up front, then what we get is people that are able to, certainly on the candidate side, that now can start to assess whether this is the right place for them. Like, is this the right culture? Because again, one of these things is that people talk about cultures and values in the macro. It's the company, but Tenable's global, right? So now you've got to kind of break it down into regions. Yes, we all got to buy into that overall kind of ambition of the company and what we want to try and do, but the way that things operate in kind of in Singapore is a very different way to that it kind of operates in the UK or Germany or Texas or wherever it may be. So you've then got to kind of break it down into kind of the micro cultures, and then then you break it down again into the teams, the micro cultures of the teams. So these things are never ending. So when someone says, what's the company culture? It's such a broad statement. And like, how do you assess an individual's culture? Well, again, it depends what that individual is doing, at a certain time. Again, is there a fundamental set of principles, values, culture they do? But culture isn't one thing at one point. It changes. And if you believe that the culture can only be one static thing, then that's a problem. That's you've got to be able to mix. And again, I'm lucky. I mix and I hired for lots of different regions, lots of different people. So therefore, I'm always learning. Like, actually, is this appropriate? Is this the right way for this? Does this team over here think this is? Is this the culture that they think is right? So again, it's not necessarily kind of you keep moving the thing. You have this sort of fundamental base, but you've also got to be open and flexible. So it's a tough thing to try and go, bang, that's it, and that works for everyone, because it kind of doesn't.
No, totally get it, and we could probably have a conversation just purely on culture itself. But obviously, I think we've covered that quite nicely. I mean, just regarding sort of candidates that typically stand out and are successful at Tenable, I suppose. Dual question really, from a tech and delivery side, and then from a sales and GTM side. What typical sort of attributes top performers at the company have? What makes a standout successful individual at Tenable?
Again, and probably some of these answers are going to be quite boring in terms of the not the fairly standard, but I think again, when you look at the individual roles, I mean, some of the common denominators around kind of what makes people successful is typically they're coming in and sort of giving us back the same as we're putting in. Like, when they come in, like, they actually come into the company, they do the things that they said they could do. That's kind of number one, which is they come in and actually they are doing all the learning, and they're doing all those things, and they're kind of performing the tasks that we want them to. That's absolutely, because that's a job, right? But then the ones that really seem to succeed, and the ones that are coachable, that are humble, and again, they're reflective around, okay, I've done that, can I do it better? How do I improve? But not just improve themselves, but also bring other people up. How do they kind of get that out to the team? So like there's no one secret source as like, do this and do this, follow these steps, and you will be successful. But I think it's a number of things. The people that end up doing that are the ones that kind of remain grounded, coachable and communicative. The ones that again, talk to people, talk to their managers, and not just about kind of good stuff, bad stuff. I mean, again, someone is never going to be, we hope they are, especially in the sales organization, hitting 100% all the time. But we know there are other kind of things that are going to drive behavior. So we want to make sure that in the sales organization, people know their businesses, and therefore if things are going well, great, they can communicate and they can forecast and pipeline, all do all those things and close. But when things aren't going well, it's that kind of, hey, I need you to, this is what's happening, but this is how I'm going to kind of fix the problem, or this is what I'm going to do to try and kind of, get another deal in, or kind of, change the decision. So it's some of those things where it's not just, we've all been there, right? We've all hired those people that that you interview, they say all the right things, you're completely kind of bowled over, like, my God, this is going to be amazing. I can't wait for that person to join. And then when they join, you're like, who's this that's turned up? Because I thought you were going to do X, Y, and Z, and suddenly, like, you don't know what that is. And that kind of comes, back to that sort of the way that we interview, with this kind of level of honesty and transparency, is that we're hoping, because we're upfront, the candidates are going to be upfront with us, because it's not about, do you have a certain set of skills? It's also about understanding the skills that you don't have, but you have the ambition and the drive and the will to get those skills, and you'll do what it takes to achieve those.
Mm.
And again, being coachable. So I think, it's hard. It's a hard thing to kind of nail down and say, what do we look for? We kind of look for what everyone looks for, which is, do we think the person that we are, or the people that we're interviewing, fit what we want, have those foundational sort of skills and fundamentals that we think we can build on top of, or they're going to be additive. I mean, and again, it's very much a situational kind of, where are we as a business? What do we need? Because what we're looking for, if we're looking for, if we're looking for something that we've got lots of, do we just need to kind of bring in, and this is probably not the right term, but do we kind of bring in the status quo, what we've always had?
Yeah.
Or are we looking to do something different, and therefore actually there's a learning for us? So we need someone who's going to come in and teach us what we need as well, but also kind of deliver on what we want. So we've got to do that, and we've got to do that as a recruitment team to understand that, and therefore that kind of informs us about what we're going to do and how we're going to go out and find it, and then obviously kind of what we're then talking to the candidates about, and then hopefully those skills. But I mean, I was at a conference a few months ago, and someone said to me, like, recruitment, and not necessarily recruitment, but decision making and hiring is a roll of the dice. And and as much as we would all like to go, no, it's a bit like someone in a casino. Oh, it's all right. No, I've got a method. I've got a method, and I've got this. It's like to a point, is that's true. But at some point, you're taking a risk, and the risk is that it's 50-50. They're either going to work out and they're going to do everything and hopefully more than you thought, or they're not going to work out. And that's a different thing.
Yeah, no, totally get that. And I think obviously lots of different points covered there, regarding, the skill set, the attitude, which I think is obviously always key with any major hire. I suppose one of the things that we kind of didn't really touch on is obviously, understanding what a top performer looks like, but regarding the skill set side. So, what types of skill sets are you looking for? Because I know there's an abundance of applicants out there at the minute looking for their next career move. They're looking at Tenable, they're looking at obviously competition. Is there anything specifically that you look for in your team and as a business as well? So do you hire from the wider cybersecurity market, or do you purely look for exposure management and vulnerability? I know from a tech perspective, a lot of hiring managers want, that person that's, ready to run, can hit the ground running, can go immediately, knows the tech, the perfect unicorn candidate. But do you take from the wider security market? Or do you take people from outside the industry that are looking to train up? That's from a sort of a tech perspective and also a sales perspective as well, because I know both are very different. But what's kind of what you look for?
Yeah, and I think the answer, and again, not to kind of be the politician, is yes and no. I think yes, we do in certain roles that plays very nicely into kind of taking someone outside of the industry we're in and taking that skill set or taking what they've got right now and then bringing them into what we do. So, and there's some, we've got some really good examples, like from a sales perspective, we've got examples where we've taken people, in fact, one of our most successful in the UK, that we took from the car sales industry, kind of auto parts. So
cutthroat,
a little bit rough. I won't mention any names, but if he watches this, he'll know exactly who I'm talking about. A bit rough around the edges, and we had to remind him on several occasions that this wasn't a garage anymore. But in terms of the way that they sold, the type of selling they did, the ability to consume information and the will to consume information, and be coachable and all those kind of things. And, again, just that I've been given an opportunity to go from one industry to another industry, flying, absolutely flying. All right. And we've seen that progression from, all the way from SDR, which is our kind of entry level role, all the way to kind of our enterprise TMs. All right. So, those two or three career moves to get to where they've got to now, and we've seen the same in some of our technical roles, technical sales roles, where we've taken people from the kind of the corporate environment and who don't have necessarily the selling skills or the kind of the I suppose the kind of the vendor skills, but we see their technical capability, and now what we're trying to do is kind of give that, give them some of that sales acumen. But what benefits them is that they understand the language that the customer has, so that they can talk and teach us. Like, whereas we as vendors sometimes think we know it, or, well, this is what the customer wants, this is what X client wants. Well, actually, let's go and speak to someone who's worked and spent time in their shoes. Let's see if this resonates. And sometimes you get the answer like, no, like, don't say that. This is the language you want to speak. This is going to resonate really well. And again, it's taking those things. Now, when we look at it at the pure technical side, so the engineers and the researchers and things like that, again, that really is, there are absolutely some of those roles where we need a specific set of skills and a specific kind of ability, and that will only come from certain places. So it is very specific. But in other places, again, we've seen it come from interns that are just on their way up, but again, they've got that drive, that ambition, and it's like, great, let's take that, let's mold it and use some of that, I suppose, kind of freshness to help us. So absolutely we do. I think always we've as a hiring team, as a manager, but also we're working with the hiring managers, what we're really doing is kind of assessing what's right. Is this the right role to go outside of that, rather than kind of go, oh, let's just consider everyone, because that's not fair. That's just not fair. It's not fair for the people that are applying, and it's not fair for us as well, because again, what we don't want to do, we want to make sure that if we are bringing someone outside the industry, or someone that really we need to make sure that we're going to give them the time and the ability and the space to kind of build up. But across the company, we've seen it work tremendously well. And lots of success stories from outside the industry that have come in and absolutely flying. So yes is the answer.
Good. No, I love the example. I think it's great taking someone from car sales, bringing them into sort of a more B2B environment. Probably did a bit of B2B and B2C, obviously, in the car sales side. But yeah, that sort of raw ability, transferring those skills into a different area and directing them. I think that's absolutely amazing. I think the key thing there that we touched on more on the sort of sales and GTM side was having those soft skills. I think that's the key thing. If you've got someone that's got the attitude and the willingness to learn, but also the soft skills as well, I think that's imperative.
Yeah, I think on the technical side, what I've seen the most is people want to see their work mean something, and there's lots of places where we've brought them in, for whatever role they've been doing outside of either cyber, more so like they've been doing research or kind of software engineering for a different company, is that sometimes the work that they do kind of just goes into one big sort of washing machine, and they're not too it doesn't really kind of come out. Tenable is quite different to that it's innovative. It wants people to kind of have ideas. It wants to use ideas. So there is, it's not so big that you're doing something that doesn't get seen. Like, you really can get seen, and your work matters, right? Which is a big thing. So when we've taken from some of the FANG companies, that's some of the reasons why people come across, which is, well, actually, I was just kind of, a very small cog in a massive wheel, and there was lots of small cogs. Whereas actually now, like the work I'm doing, I can actually see where the impact is. So again, and that's part of that. Do people want to come across into the industry? And cyber is a great place to be. And with everything that's going on in the world, cyber and cybersecurity specifically is just continually in the headlines. Again, there is that sense that you can make a difference, especially with some of the things that we do and some of the companies we protect and some of the bad stuff we hope to stop happen.
100%. Fantastic. No, totally agree. Just on sort of the areas of skills again, sort of, are there any areas sort of emerging within sort of Tenable where you believe that certain expertise are going to become more important? The business is going to require more. Is there anything at all that you can think of that may?
Should we just say AI? Should we just put AI on everything? AI just AI. Yes, I think sometimes it's kind of we don't know what we don't know, and we've got to kind of keep an eye on that. So there's very much about, and again, that's why like we're not necessarily in TA necessarily the expert. Some of that is we need some of that feedback from the hiring teams and our customers to kind of go, what's the next big thing? There's only kind of a certain amount of languages that things can be built in. It's kind of, are we using the right variant or the latest, greatest? And I think some of that is, again, some of that feedback loop, which is actually, it's better if we do it like this. So what is the skill set? I think the thing that we've always got to contend with is, one, well, what is the skill set? How readily available it is, and then kind of what's the expectation around actually being able to drive them to what we do. And again, some of that is around talking to, and by the way, some of the kind of the more technical stuff, as you probably can tell as I dance around it, it's because I'm not completely au fait with it all. But one of the things that often we kind of talk about is the tech stack and what we use and this, that, and the other. And again, some of the reasons that people join us is because they think that the tech stack we're using is more innovative. It's kind of more flexible than what they're using. So we're always looking at that. I think you've got to. But again, it's the challenge for us in recruitment is the classic. Okay, great. Here's a new X. Go get me one. They've got to have 5 years experience of it, and let's get it. And I want X amount of candidates. And then you find out that X language or X skill has only been around for 2 years, and no one's got that. So then you've got that. What are we actually looking for? Yeah. So the other thing I would say as well, which kind of slightly counteracts that, is that we're not always looking to the outside. We're not always looking at what's going on. We have lots of things that Tenable, as benefits for employees in terms of just learning platforms, but also things that we can get reimbursed, tuition, and other types of learning. We run these programs so people can go out and learn different things. It might not necessarily be straight away relevant or applicable to their role, but some of these people are going to learn these new things, these new innovative things that ultimately they will bring back into the business and use. So again, some of the benefits that Tenable has and some of the things that they kind of give to the employees around those, bursaries and stuff like that. Tuition bursaries are used for that. And then we look internally like who's got that skill. And again, to kind of bridge into a topic of skills-based hiring and kind of a skills-based organization. Like everyone, what we're doing is trying to figure out what skills do we have, and therefore to improve upon kind of what we need to go out to the market for, but also kind of look at that internal mobility. What skills do we have internally? So it's a big thing. We don't always have to go outside and look for it. It's kind of what have we got homegrown.
Fantastic. And I'll touch on the sort of the internal offering and sort of the stuff that you do for employees in a sort of a later question, because obviously it goes kind of hand in hand with retention of employees and what you're looking for. But sort of just going down the sort of route still of external candidates looking inwards, obviously talent teams, lots of people I'm speaking to at the minute, an abundance of application volumes, obviously companies really struggling with trying to, deal with that. Talent teams completely swamped with it. And I know you've touched on the fact that, you've got success stories of taking people from outside the industry, training them up and developing and letting them go. Obviously people from the industry that you've taken in and obviously, train them the Tenable way and let them go. So, someone looking in, if they're interested in obviously the business, what stands out for you in a resume, and also, how are the team dealing with the huge volumes when you are open to people from potentially outside the industry as well as inside? So that kind of creates a lot more volume when you're open to different people. So how are your team dealing with the volume at the minute, and what typically stands out in a resume for you, Dan?
Yeah, good question. In fact, I was having this conversation with someone yesterday about the need for a CV writer and like setting a CV up so it gets past the ATS scoring system. At which point I kind of told them that that's all a myth, and save your money. So if I kind of deal with it sort of the second part first and in a slightly different way. From a technical point of view, there are things that we do, and again, kind of originated from one of our kind of members of staff many years ago, Jack Daniels, around things like B-sides. We run these type of events or participate in these type of events where we're there. Right? So again, it's those like, come and talk to us. We have researchers there, we have members of the team there that are kind of representing obviously us, but obviously the topics we do. Like, come and speak to people. Like there's this kind of, everyone's sort of reliant on the CV. The CV's been around for a long time, and you could argue how good a CV really is at getting you through the door and kind of getting you that that callback. But referral is key. Referral is absolutely key. It's if you have been to a B-sides and you've spoken to someone like, oh, you've got some roles. Again, there's an incentive for those individuals, to refer good people in. Hey, I was speaking to X person. I've seen that there's a role. Great, there's a referral fee. Again, there's these little levers that the outside world should understand, that, again, there's an incentive for employees to refer good people. Now, obviously, again, I'll probably get shot for saying this in terms of now everyone's going to flood people and there's referral fees all over the place.
Who do I know at Tenable?
Yeah, exactly. But it is. But that's always gonna kind of improve your chances, right? In terms of, Joe or Jill, referred you in, and it's like, okay, great. As a TA team, we're going to do our employee the courtesy of following up on their referral. No question. In terms of some of the other ways, I mean, what we're looking for, we're kind of going through is we're always kind of pattern matching. Does this CV, does this individual, are they in the right place? Again, we run and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but kind of a hybrid model, but focused around hubs. And we want people to get the benefits of the office and the community that we're trying to build, that we had before COVID, and COVID killed all that. But what we're trying to do is, are these people there so that they can, integrate? Do they have clearly the skills, right? Can they show the kind of the inputs and outputs? What we often see, certainly from a technical point of view, is that loads of skills. I've got I know every language. I've done everything. Yeah. But what we want to see, okay, well, what did you do with it? And it's the same for sales. I work for this company, that company, that company. I did X, Y, and Z. But again, from sales, it's numbers. Achievement. I hit this number. I overachieved. I underachieved. Blah blah blah. The CV is so well. It's so the de facto that, again, recruitment teams have got very good at kind of spotting. Well, this is what I'm looking for. So how we're dealing with it as best we can, to a certain extent, is we're always going to kind of make that judgment when we see CVs, is kind of who fits that, who fits that kind of, those marks the best, location, experience, again, depending on your kind of, your frame, depending on the role, the manager, the kind of the talent pool available, we're assessing kind of how long people have stayed in certain jobs. Are they early in career where it makes more sense? You know, what are the type of companies they've done, that they've worked for? You know, the companies they've worked for, do we know about them? So if there's, you know, again, you know, with all of that activity pre and post COVID around, you know, rifts and things like that, again, we've got to kind of factor all that in, so we start to decipher what's in that CV. So we're not just making a kind of a right, you're in, you're out. I mean, I heard something horrendous the other day, and this is not a Tenable thing. You know, a hiring manager saying that every second CV they kind of get rid of. It's like for some kind of candidate. Some kind of superstition. You know, oh, every second candidate, you know, doesn't, you know, I just kind of bin. It's like, no. I mean, we've got to filter. We can't talk to everyone. Yeah. Right. So there is those are the elements. So all I would say from a CV perspective is inputs and outputs. You know, and again, the STAR method. You know, whatever you want to do. Like, what did you do? What was the output? You know, if it's sales, did you drive, you know, more? You know, did you achieve what your target was, what the goal was? Yeah. Did you achieve it, or did you overachieve it? You know, again, the kind of, you know, what did you learn? You know, what additional tasks did I take on? You know, those are the kind of things. Because, you know, it's a competitive environment. Of course, we're looking at names. We're looking at the companies you've worked with before. There are going to be some marquee names that you look at and you go, oh, that's interesting. Like, that name is a name we would like people from there. Yeah. Or they stand out. You know, absolutely. When we look at, you know, and again, this is not, I'm kind of being fairly broad brush, but if we see people that apply to us from any of the FANG companies, we're like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why they'd apply here. And again, not because we don't think we've got something to offer, but we know why people go there. Yeah. And we're very different. So, okay, you're going to these companies because apparently they offer the world and they've got slides to your desk. We don't have any slides to the desk. Yeah. So what is it about Tenable that you like? And again, that's what, so some of it is interest. Some of it is, oh, I'm going to do it because I want to figure out. And then that informs about some of the other stuff that we might do kind of in, you know, future searching and stuff like that. So, you know, it is hard. You know, we try and be as human as we can in it. You know, absolutely. There are things that we have, you know, we try and interact with everyone in one way, shape or form, whether that is something that we have put together, but again, kind of sorry, but this isn't the right role, time, blah blah blah, and but hopefully you can stay connected to us, and if the right role comes up, then perhaps we can have a chat again. And then it kind of gets more human the further along in the process that you get, and but that's the way. But there is no algorithm that kind of does it at the gate.
Yeah. No, fantastic. Absolutely appreciate that. And I suppose going into the what you mentioned about the hybrid side, because obviously at the minute everyone's still very much, I want to be remote. Especially the tech and delivery guys and girls out there. Sales obviously tends to be more remote anyway, and being out there with the customers. But what's sort of the stance on remote working? Now and in the future, and obviously mentioned that hybrid model. So what is it that you're looking for? What's the stance of the company?
Yeah, I mean, so kind of globally, we've made the decision to go back to 3 days a week in the office. Yeah, I think but there is again certain roles that there are different demands on those roles. Again, you talk about things like field sales, where actually we want people out with customers and partners and things like that. I think it's a hard, again, kind of talking about that culture thing, it's a fine line that I think everyone's trying to figure out. I think the key thing for me, I mean, I run a team that is kind of all over the world, so what I see, and the difference is that I could go and speak to some of the team that are in Israel, or I could speak to the team in Singapore, the team in Dubai versus the team in the UK or Germany, like everyone's got a different idea in terms of what they feel. I mean, there is a very community culture and office-based culture in Singapore. There is the same in Dubai. They want to be together, and it's how you drive that. I think the key thing for us is how do we drive the reason to be in the office, to collaborate, to be a community, and all of those kind of things. It's tough because COVID kind of switched things up overnight, and completely kind of changed the way people work for the better in some cases and for the worse in other cases. And I think there are a number of reasons, and probably not for this podcast, but there are a number of reasons why companies are trying to kind of bring some of that back, right? But I think for me, it's it's kind of how you stay connected to the business. It's how you kind of stay connected with the teams that you're in. How do you kind of make those those things? Some of the things are intentional, and we do some great things. If I kind of take the example of the Dublin office, that do some really good, get people into the office, kind of put on some kind of lunch, but also there's some kind of event to that. They bring in a speaker, not necessarily about cyber or just anything. They had someone who was kind of a world leading free diver that came in and spoke about that. And again, make these things where there's an engagement, and it's not just about work, right? Which, again, draws people in, kind of brings that into it. So it's a fine balance. But again, honesty and transparency up front, right? We don't make any bones about it when we're talking to people in an interview. This is the expectation, right? This is what we expect from you. Basically, kind of speak now, forever, or forever hold your peace. If you don't want to buy into that, then basically qualify yourself out. I mean, and again, I think sort of going back to a lot of the things we've talked about, it's that sales mentality from a recruiting standpoint. Qualify very quickly. These are the kind of things that are not necessarily the non-negotiables, but these are the things that we're going to hold firm on. Like, do you buy into that? And if the answer is maybe, let's see how we go, there's a little question mark. But if it's a no, great. Well, thank you. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll get to speak again at another point. Maybe if you change your mind, great. But again, honesty, transparency up front, hide nothing, within reason, but don't hide those things. And then everyone knows that when they walk through the door, what the expectation is, and there's no surprises.
Perfect. No, that's brilliant. I must admit, I know we've spoken a few times, and I did sort of 7 years working from home and just got fed up with the four walls, and I love being in the office. So I'm in the office now. I absolutely love it, but I get that some people out there, they do prefer a bit of flexibility. Remote working is still driving people, and I suppose that goes to the next question, sort of around and I know you touched on this earlier, around sort of the training and development that you offer. How are you going about retaining, talent at present? Because, there's a lot of companies out there that are looking to take from competitors, getting that ready-made individual. What are Tenable doing to make sure that, employees are happy, being kept in the business and being given them that sort of that nurturing to get them to stay? What's high on the agenda?
Yeah, I think, and if you look at the majority of I say the majority, if you look at a lot of Tenable people, there's a lot of tenure, in the Tenable people. I mean, I've been here 8 years. And again, it kind of comes back to one of the things I said at the start. I mean, Tenable tries to do everything and offer as much to everyone as fairly as possible. So again, there are particular roles where there very much is a career path, SDR to CTM, commercial territory manager to TM, and and vice versa. If I kind of focus on the go-to-market side for a second, there are those things that as the company matures, more of those opportunities to move up or in different directions have come. So from a career perspective, it's Tenable opening up those opportunities to allow people to move into them and be considered. And to a certain degree the same when I look at some of the technical side, not just kind of the linear kind of trajectory. I'm going to go, to software engineer to senior to staff, and the kind of the career progression, but also to start switching teams. Actually, I want to go and do this. So there's these career levers, for the want of a better term, where it's like, okay, the kind of, I suppose the expected. I would hope that if I go into any company that there is going to be some kind of career path. Some of the other things around the how do people access them? Well, again, like I say, there are, I suppose, the on-the-job training, the things that people are going through and being trained in to improve skills, to improve the things that they do. That's a given. But then we have all of these, I suppose, kind of ancillary things that are kind of help to drive that. So we have a learning platform, and people can go and do, classes and kind of take content off of this learning platform. But as I say, there are these other areas and financial levers that you can use as benefits to go and learn something or get more education. So I did my MBA, which after 25 years of not doing any academic work was a mission, but that was because Tenable supported me to do it and gave me the financial support to go and do it. And again, that's got me, that has now given me, the MBA, right? So it's things like that. And there's other examples of people doing exactly the same, but it's not just about learning as in, kind of picking up a book or, I've done a course. Some people are using that to go to certain conferences or to certain events and things like that. So there is something available to everyone. Now, one of the challenges that you have is, do people use it? So it's all well and good people saying kind of, oh, well, what do you offer me? Do you use it? So we have this fund, this amount of money that people can use. And I don't know what the figure is, but I would suggest that there are as many people that don't use it as do use it. But again, this is one of those things that Tenable, wants people to go and use to because it's going to help them, right? It's going to help us to grow as a company, get some of these skills that you talked about that might be the up and coming, the unknown, the niche skills that we might need in the future. So there's lots of that. And of course, there are things that come in that we then sort of, again, so if we talk about cloud, we acquired, we acquired some cloud companies, and then, we kind of looked at our workforce or some of the people that were going to kind of interact with that. We looked at the level of cloud experience and exposure they had. And then suddenly people were going on and doing AWS courses and Azure courses and things like that to bring them up. So there are some that are very much work related, and there some are not. And then again, we're the same as everyone else. We have annual reviews. There are financial levers that kind of are utilised. But again, we try and remain fair in everything. So everyone has got an opportunity, but where people don't get the opportunity or they don't get that role, again, we try and put plans in place to, okay, but next time it comes up, how do we prepare you better? You're now on the radar. So it's again, as much as we can, we are looking at that internal stuff and internal mobility and things like that. And I go to a lot of conferences where people are talking about internal mobility, and I kind of sit back and I think, Joe, what we do that really well. And the amount of things that we've done where I see that, the internal is moving and is moving into a new role, a new challenge, and it's a different career path. I think we actually do it really well.
Fantastic. Excellent. No, that's brilliant. And I suppose the next question, obviously, mentioning the fact that you've got obviously cloud businesses that you've acquired and that skill set that you've brought in. What do you think are the biggest hiring challenges in cyber, over the next sort of 3-5 years? Is it that sort of technical people, delivery people with the soft skills so they can be more customer facing and happy to do that? Is it the lack of trained professionals in the industry coming through and not having that on the keyboard experience? What sort of your thoughts around that? What's the specific skills that you think might be lacking, or what's the biggest hiring challenges? for you?
I think part of, again, you look at some of the data on how many cybersecurity companies there are, right? It's a very popular market, and it's, there's lots of different segments to it. So our biggest problem is competition, right? It's a very noisy space. So how do we differentiate ourselves versus, a CrowdStrike or a Tanium or a Palo Alto or a Hornet or whoever it might be, right? So whoever is seen as a competitor, in one way, shape, or form. They might not necessarily be a technical competitor, but they're in security, right? Or they're in tech. They're a competitor. I think that the biggest challenge for us, like everything, is all timing. Like when we go up against any of these people and we're kind of getting countered, or we're kind of, they've got another offer, is like, do we feel that we've got the most compelling thing? Do we have the most compelling offering against, some of these others, right? And again, I think when you look at where Tenable is, I mean, I'm lucky, right? I've been at Tenable 8 years. So I've seen a lot of the change. I've seen a lot of where we were and where we are now, and where I think we've still got to go. And I think, Tenable's been around for a long time. We've made a lot of acquisitions in a reasonably short amount of time compared to kind of, early part of where I was. And, every one of those is additive, and it creates a new sort of story for Tenable. So yes, Nessus is kind of, where we started, and vulnerability management is kind of where we, where we then sort of got this new wind in our sails. But now we've got all of these other things that are kind of coming in, in the cloud, kind of cloud, the identity, kind of the data side of it that we've we've looked at, OT, all of these things that create this new, I suppose, runway for us, right? And what we have at the heart of that is an extremely loyal customer base and a lot of customers. And some of that is we are going out and telling, kind of talking to candidates about, like, this is, there's a huge amount still to do at Tenable. We've gone from single product to multi-product to now we're talking platform. That requires a different skill set, different mindset, and we have to go and get those people that can just build into what we've already got, but some of those people that are going to kind of take us and teach us what that next step looks like and how we perform as a platform seller, not as a kind of someone who sold vulnerability management and now they've got to figure out how they sell all these other parts, or kind of this platform. So there's still so much to do. I think when we talk about it, and it sounds very cliched around kind of when, like, oh, we're a startup in a mature company kind of speech, but there is a lot of that. There is a lot of that, which is this. You will be surprised how much hasn't been done because of how we've operated. So we're still, we've been successful. We continue to be successful, but now we need to kind of do something differently. And that's why when people come in, often what I get is like, I thought you might be telling the truth a little bit, but actually you're right. There's still loads of stuff to do. There's still loads of market to go after. There's still lots of things we can do and, and drive a different outcome and things like that. So there is still a huge amount of opportunity, but again, it's noisy because you're in the market, right? So you go and talk to people. I've got a great opportunity. There's loads to do. You can make loads of money. Says you and the 10 other people that are talking to me. So it's now you've got to kind of build that, which is kind of going back to that, honesty and transparency. Is if I'm talking to them and then, the next person's talking to them and the person after that and the person, if we're all saying the same thing in terms of what's your value? What can you do here? What difference can you make? And I think that's the part for us is that you can make an impact. Whether that's sales or technical, you can make an impact. Your work will be seen, your value will be seen. You can do some really cool things because we haven't got it all figured out. Whereas there are definitely companies that I've worked with and for in the past, where it's just, come in, it's just a maintenance role, just carry on doing that. We don't really want you to change anything. Just carry on doing that, because don't upset anything. Whereas, of course, there is an element of that, but it's like, well, what can you teach us? Like, if you've come from company X, well, how did you do it there? What do you see in our process that you didn't see? What can we improve on? What's better? What's worse? And actually, should we change something? So, impact. Impact is a big thing. I think there's still huge amounts of opportunity. We continue to try and drive a more strategic kind of vision of ourselves. We do some fundamental stuff for customers that's very important for them to be secure. And we've just got to kind of get bolder, right? And we're doing some of that. When you see some of the things we're doing, some of the kind of the marketing content that we're putting out, which is kind of much more, is much bolder than we've had before. So, I think we're in a great place. We just need people to see it, right, and not get taken by some of the other stuff that's going on.
Yeah, and look, that's the idea of this podcast is, directing the right type of people that feel that, the particular company has what they're looking for, like you said, making an impact, being able to make a difference in an organization. That's what people are really looking for. I suppose one of the sort of last things I wanted to discuss with you is, and this has only happened in the last sort of 15 months of my sort of recruiting career. It's the first time I'd heard of it sort of 15 months ago in 19 years. Is obviously the issues around sort of fraudulent resumes and identity theft. And I know we touched on AI and improving AI from a cybersecurity standpoint, and how that's going to have a massive effect on companies bringing in that talent. But sort of, how are you finding it? Have your team come across any sort of suspect activity? Has there been an increase? What protocols are you getting your team to implement in order to make sure that you can see through fraudulent resumes, and also, identities on video calls, deep fakes and everything. So are you seeing it? And what are you doing to sort of interact it and mitigate?
Yeah, I think number one is, right, I mean, again, if you look at the Tenable strapline with the exposure management company. So absolutely, the one thing that we have to be aware of is exposure. So the answer is, I mean, we're taking all of the precautions that we can to try and mitigate any of those things. I mean, we're keeping an eye on it. And again, working in a kind of a global organization and things like that, you've got to be on it, right? Because again, the prevalence of Zoom calls and things like that. I mean, I've seen some of the kind of the LinkedIn scare stuff, and people putting calls. I think the way that obviously there's a technical element to that, kind of when we use certain technologies for doing tech tests, there's, proctoring and things like that. So we're asking for, verifications and IDs and things like that, which again, like anything, it's like when you go and do your driving test or whatever, you've got to kind of provide some kind of, identification. You've also got to balance that with some of the, again, we're international, we're global. So you've got to kind of then balance that with some of the global or kind of regional requirements around whether you can actually do that or not. But, in the back of my head, like I say, with the exposure management company, we've got to kind of protect that, What we're really doing, and again, is really driving as much face-to-face as we can, not relying on tech. Of course, there are elements where, again, not every stage of the process is going to be face-to-face, but where we can, at the earliest opportunity, for a number of different reasons, not just from a security point of view, is Damien who he said he was? If you turned up, and full head of hair, and it's like, okay, well, maybe this isn't Damien.
That went a long time ago.
Maybe it is. That was bad. Sorry, I apologise. But we're trying to drive some of those things so that person sat in front of you is who they say they are. But that's not the reason. That isn't it. It's kind of an ancillary sort of benefit to it. But the reason we're doing that is, again, that interviews are performative, right? The person that turns up in front of you, are they the person that you spoke to or you saw? You know, do they have the same charisma? Do they have the same kind of energy that they had and you were blown away with? But then when you see them in person, they're completely different. And we've all seen that, right? We've all seen that. But also it gets that candidate to see the office, to see the environment they're going to work in. It gets them to see everything. You know, now that's on the plus side and it all goes through. Some of these things, when we start to, again, from an honesty and transparency point of view, which is, hey, as you move through the process, you're going to be asked for, you know, verifications, and obviously at the back end there's reference checks and things like that. You know, we hope those act as a deterrent, right? And therefore those people that may have ulterior motives and nefarious kind of reasons for doing so kind of go, well, actually, you know, I don't want to get involved in that. So yeah, we're absolutely aware of it. We've got to be aware of it. And again, you know, we've kind of seen with, you know, I've seen with the stuff on LinkedIn, and yeah, we just got to stay vigilant and, you know, have a robust process around it, and do our best to make it difficult.
Yeah, no, 100%. I know there's lots of different ways and different means. I know we've discussed that before, and probably again could have another sort of conversation around that. But I suppose last but not least, I know earlier on you touched on, you know, attending events, you know, B-sides, and obviously networking and referrals is a great way of, you know, getting into Tenable. I suppose for people out there that probably haven't done that and want to be able to, you know, get in touch with you and the team, what's the easiest way to connect and apply? Is it, you know, the careers page? Is it LinkedIn? You know, what ways and means should they be trying to interact with you, you and the team, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above, right? I mean, it's kind of, you know, we do participate in events. You know, there's webinars and things like that are put on. We do, you know, engagement with certain bodies, you know, kind of all round the kind of the world. So again, kind of look at for those opportunities, you know, some of the events that we might be attending, the events we're putting on ourselves. Yeah, but absolutely. I mean, all the recruiters and, you know, pretty much everyone's on LinkedIn. You know, the careers page is always, you know, is always there. So for you to interact. But yeah, I mean, kind of any way you can. But as I kind of said at the start, the kind of the best way is always kind of who you know. Yeah, and that might not even just be Tenable. It might be some of the, you know, people that you know at partners or the channel that we work with, or you know, or whatever it is. Anyone that kind of interacts with us that, you know, we see some kind of value in, that kind of says, hey, I've got someone good you might, you know, want to speak to, or, you know, but do some digging, right? Do some digging, do your research, you know, kind of sort of just coming in and saying, hey, I want a job, you got a job. You know, that doesn't always necessarily go over well, but the kind of, hey, I've been, you know, following this, or I kind of see you've done this, and, you know, I'm kind of interested, that always gets someone's attention. And then, yeah, just engage. And then, yeah, but I'm on LinkedIn, always free. You know, feel free to reach out to me. I always like a chat. But yeah, that's always the best way.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, look, Dan, obviously, you know, finally from me, it's been an absolute pleasure, obviously, spending time with you, and obviously you've been taking part in this podcast. Everyone out there watching, if you want to make a difference, you know, you want to have big impact in a company, and you fancy obviously the culture that Tenable are offering, and you're open to that sort of hybrid working model, then look, get in touch with Dan and the team. They're doing great things over there. I'm sure him and his team would be open to having a conversation with you and seeing how everything works from there. So Dan, once again, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Cheers, Damien.